And we're live. Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome to the Mojo Show, your real estate podcast where we talk everything real estate. I'm your host, Joe Mortgage.
And I'm Cup of Joe Mortgage.
This week's episode, we are finally wrapping up our series on your home buying roadmap after several weeks off due to the holidays and, well, I think me being sick and this, that, and the other. We're finally able to wrap this up, and apologize to everyone that we did not, because I thought we had this scheduled to wrap up the year back in December, and somehow miscounted a week, and we weren't able to wrap it up. So today we get to wrap up the series. We've covered, your first steps to home ownership, finding your dream home, behind the paperwork, underwriting, unveiled, and getting to clear to close. And all of those episodes, you can go to our YouTube channel at the Mojo Show Real Estate Podcast. Check out the whole series on there to catch up on things. But today we're going to focus on the last step in your home buying roadmap, your closing day countdown, and what you can expect for that day. But before we get to that, little coffee talk between the Joes. Now, this time of the year, Joe, I don't know if you've noticed, but the Girl Scouts are out setting up at, the different grocery stores and everything. Of course, stacks and stacks of all those cookies. I got to ask, I don't know if you've bought any yet, but is there one that, Girl Scout, is there your favorite?
I would love to say there was one, but I love cookies. So I think I've got a top three that I love.
Top three. Let's hear
top three. So I am the peanut butter. I think it's called the Do-si-dos. Those are favorites. The Samoan, the coconut with the caramel and the chocolate, and then Thin Mints. I don't know what it is. You pull those out of the freezer, and they're just like,
there you go.
So those are my weaknesses. So I'm trying to stay away from grocery stores right now, so that way I don't have to buy any. I am trying to still drop. I've still got 25 more pounds to go by this year. So I did it last year, so I got another goal for this year. So
okay, awesome, fantastic.
What is your favorite ones?
Well, and glad to share that with you. Those of you that are listening in, if you've got a favorite, I'd love to hear which one you like. Right. And how many boxes you typically buy of that particular one. Drop it in the comments below. Would love to hear it. For me, it really comes down to two, honestly. And one of them is that, was it Samoan, right? With the coconut.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah. Love those. And then they have these ones that are a lemon flavor. Right.
Those came out not too long ago.
Yeah.
Those weren't the originals.
Those are
I can't remember which one it replaced, but yeah, my wife likes those lemon ones every once in a while. So yeah, when those get into the house, I usually don't touch them.
They remind me of they kind of remind me of lemon scones that I make. Right. Okay. And but now here's another question for you. Just cookies in general, right? Okay. So as far as, should they be soft or crunchy?
You know how you have a household of a man and woman, husband and wife, where they have different college teams, they have different sports teams, yes. And when they're rivals, they kind of, that's us in a house about cookies. My wife loves those crunchy, crack in your mouth cookies, and I love the soft, doughy, chewy ones.
Okay.
So it's always an argument in our house. So I get half and half sometimes. What about you?
Now I'm not that picky. It depends on the cookie, right?
Okay.
Because like Oreo cookies, I mean, they're crunchy, right? But I love me some Oreo cookies.
Right.
But then, I mean, you get some of those, nice soft chocolate chip cookies, right? I mean, having them soft, just a little crunch on the bottom, right? Yep. So, I mean, that's, it depends on the cookie. Quite honestly.
It depends on the cookie.
Depends on the cookie. Now, with Girl Scout cookies, did your daughter ever sell them?
She never actually got into Girl Scouts. Now that I think about it, she was with all the other activities. No. What about yours? What about your daughter?
No, she didn't either. She didn't.
No.
She just kind of shied away from that and was like, "No, I don't want to do that."
Well, we do enough fundraisers with softball, so I will say, my daughter's selling raffle tickets right now. She has 5 more to sell, so I told her to get to it, so I don't have to do them. So.
Speaking of which, your daughter, she had a meet the other day, didn't, or is it coming up?
Yeah, no, actually, she had a powerlifting meet last Saturday up in Nebraska. It was her first one. Thank you for asking. She did fantastic. She got second place right behind one of her good friends and teammates.
Yeah.
They were within like 30 pounds of each other total, but it was her first meet with no equipment on or anything, and she did fantastic. So it looks like she'll be able to progress to the next step, which is a state meet up there. And then Hunter last night had his first high school meet of his senior year. Cool. I'll be posting pictures and things about that this week, but he got first place in his weight class, and he got a personal best total weight of 1,555 pounds between bench press, deadlift, and squat. So he is very excited. So hopefully we'll be advancing to regionals. It's a placement for that. And then we'll go to regionals and see how he does there. And hopefully he makes it to state. So very excited for him too.
Good luck to him. Absolutely. Wow. Fantastic. Well, today's show, we'll jump right into today's show. We are just super excited to, who we have on today. We've been planning this for a bit, obviously, and we finally get to have her on the show. She's been an escrow agent, escrow officer, I should say, for the past 13 years now. All of it spent over at Capital Title, very well-known title company, fantastic group there. Please welcome to the show, Brenda Read, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning, Joe. And Joe.
Good morning.
Yes. How are y'all today?
I love that we have Brenda on, Joe. Brenda and I, we got to meet back in 2014. Was it Rita that was?
Yes.
Yeah, Rita was there. We used to work with Rita, and then Brenda stepped into the escrow officer role. And Brenda, thank you for all your support. She helped Nash and I get our team going in the right direction for multiple years, and that's why I still use her all the time at Capital Title. Brenda is in the Grapevine office. So, I know this is a plug for Capital Title, and we really appreciate you coming on today, Brenda. But tell our viewers a little bit about yourself before we get into kind of today's topic.
Oh, certainly. So I do love our memories here anyway in the building back in the day. So I'm a Texan, born and raised. I was a Girl Scout, by the way.
So what is your favorite Girl Scout cookie?
I was a Girl Scout as well. So I love Thin Mints. But anyway, I think of myself as a detective, honestly, doing title research, diving in, solving problems, curing, just to help us get to the closing table, which is our topic. The best part, getting to walk into the closing room and meet the buyer and see, of course, the realtor and you, the lender, and just help them make their dreams come true, being homeowners. Anyway, outside of work, I would just say that I love gardening. I love camping in my casita, and my biggest love now is being a Dallas Mavs fan. So we either have season tickets and I'm at the game, or I'm watching it on TV. So tonight's the game. Let's go Mavs.
There you go. Good plug on the Mavericks there.
Yeah.
Well, Brenda, we really appreciate you coming on today. And viewers, this is a great time. If you're buying a house or if you have questions about title stuff, please drop it in our comments. We will ask Brenda live. Our guests always love having live comments and questions. So please drop them in there if you're listening and ask away. But Brenda, let's get into kind of the first thing. People are excited. They've already gotten the clear to close. They're ready to go and sign. But we always mess up as loan originators, and I will call all of us out because we don't ever set people up for the exact things to bring to closing. So help our viewers out, and what is it that they need to bring to closing the day that they're going to sign?
Perfect. Really, the first and most important thing is having a current, valid ID. It's government issued, and it's in our purse or in our pocket, and we're not looking at it regularly. But the biggest thing is making sure it's not expired. And if it's going to expire close to the closing date, I highly recommend it gets renewed before, in the event we have a delay closing. And one other thing that tends to be important is that your name on the ID matches what you have provided to the lender up front, or how the contract was prepared, of course. So IDs can make or break a closing.
Now, you said IDs and making sure the names on the IDs match the contract. So like for me, my name is Joseph, right?
Yep.
But I go by Joe. And what does it cause when there's a contract that comes in with Joe versus Joseph? You know,
Okay.
what kind of delays or what kind of things that need to take place? And are they eligible to actually have a contract in a nickname versus the name on your ID?
Well, very good question there. When it's kind of a simple situation of Joe and Joseph, I think that can be tidied up with the AKA that the lender will have in the closing package. I don't really see a problem with that, because a lot of times the ID will be Joseph Bartram, and of course the person signs as Joe Bartram, and that doesn't really cause an issue. It's really more when, for us women, you know, if you got married, could have been a couple months ago or a couple years ago, and you know, it's really difficult to get your ID updated since COVID. I mean, you kind of have to have an appointment, you know, 6 months out. So the contract, and a lot of times, you know, I think that the couple is perceived as Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but in reality, you know, she hadn't changed her name yet. And so because these are legal binding documents, when we get to the closing table, it's kind of like a little bit of a pause, you know, reach out. And a lot of times it's a redraw of documents is what it becomes.
Right.
So yeah, just making sure that if you can, and on my part too, as much, but sometimes I don't know about this non-borrowing spouse that pops up at the last minute. And that's where we have some issues.
Right. Well, and you know, that brings up another great point is if you're getting married and you haven't changed your name and you're buying a house together, then taking contract and taking it with your maiden name is fine, because you can always update names later. But going to a closing when you don't have an ID or anything that shows that, we've had so many delays because of it.
Especially here in Texas, right? Because it is a community property state, right? We need, even if the other spouse is not on the mortgage, right? We still need them there signing, don't we?
Exactly, we do. Especially if it's going to be their homestead, as you said, their spouse must attend closing. I've got a really crazy story one time. It's probably the craziest. We're at the closing table. Everything is just normal. You know, I've got the single man that we assume, and the realtor, which I'm very familiar with, you know, and, you know, we're sitting there having a great closing. And then we get to the end where I throw in my title docs, and, you know, we have some disclosures that we obviously, you know, create. And one of them is the buyer. What's your marital status? It's very simple. It just says the single or married. And so the man literally sat there, looked at the paper, looked at me, looked at the realtor, and he took his time. And I was kind of become a little confused. You know, what's difficult here? You're either single or you're married. It's very simple, cut and dry. Well, he looks at me and says, well, we're working on it. And I was like, okay. So he goes, well, I said, are you separated? And he said, yeah, we're just working on it. So I said, well, then that means you're still married, because you're really single only if you're divorced in Texas. Right. So anyway, he said, yeah. So then we stop a second, look back at the loan application where he indicated he was single. Oh. The deed had been prepared as a single man. Oh. So we, of course, had to pause on that closing, call the lender, get this all figured out. And then basically his wife was living in Florida. We're in Texas, of course. So we really clearly stopped the closing, had a redraw, had to get a remote notary out to her. Well, first, actually, he had to leave the room and he had to go call her, because, you know, it wasn't like it was just an investment property. So anyway, it was very interesting. It was an eye opener to everybody. The lender, his realtor, the whole time working with him, never knew he was married. So disclosure, right?
These things, and, you know, if you mark that wrong, right? It will come up. So, being honest up front about your marital status, even if I've had it to where they had a spouse that was in Mexico that they haven't seen for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
But they were still technically married, and it came up on a fraud report that they were possibly married, and you had to ask the question.
Yeah.
Still on that one, we had to figure out a way of doing it, and we finally got it done. But I mean, it was at least 6 months of trying to track down the person because they just don't talk anymore.
Oh,
wow.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, it's nuts. So making sure your IDs and your marital status is correct is a great thing to know before going to a signing. So the other thing, I know it's not as big of a deal now, but a lot of times in y'all's instructions from the investor is 2 forms of ID.
Yes.
And I know some companies and some title companies now are using the homeowner's insurance as the second form of ID because it's already in the evidence of insurance. They can use an insurance card, so they use that as insurance. But what is another form of ID that you recommend them bringing?
Absolutely. So they can bring, of course, a passport works great. A handgun license, that's another option. Social security card. We can even take a Costco's. It doesn't have to have a picture exactly, but the Costco membership, Sam's Club, even a work ID. So we'll see that a lot, or military ID. So there are a lot of options, but sometimes in a pinch because people are, they've just moved to Texas and they don't have, they haven't unpacked, their stuff is in a pod. So we will go with the homeowner's insurance or their car insurance, they can go get out of their glove box.
Okay. Now, a lot of times it comes up about credit cards. Well, this is another form of ID. Why are those not accepted? Because I know you've had things where you say we can't accept that. Can you just give a brief explanation on that?
Honestly, it's just more of a matter of privacy on a credit card. I just don't like to circulate that out there in any fashion. Let's just be honest.
And I agree with you for identity theft and everything else, because you have to take a scanned copy of it. And yes, we trust our systems and firewalls. It's just a layer of risk that's not worth it. So
correct.
Good point. So, perfect.
And again, for those of you that are listening in, please, any questions that you might have, concerns or what have you, drop them in the comments below. We would love to be able to answer them direct while we have Brenda here. Brenda, wanted to ask, because of course, in the past few years, there's been concern about wire fraud, right?
Mm-hmm.
As far as getting the funds to the table, so to speak. What are some different, kind of a 2-part question. One, what can our consumers do to make sure wire fraud is not going to be an issue for them? And second question, I guess, is more along the lines of what forms of payment should they, safely bring to you guys? I mean, personal check?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's a very good question. Their Texas Department of Insurance mandates good funds, what that's considered to be for title agencies to accept, buyer bring to fund closing funds. And cashier's checks. So a bank cashier's check is acceptable. Wire would be the preferred means of payment. We are pretty much going these days where if it's over 50,000, we pretty much expect it to be a wire. Under, cashier's check. And I would say that title, at least our company, does allow us to collect a personal check as long as it's $1,499.99, under that $1,500 mark. So personal check is acceptable. And, in our instructions, when we send it out, to the buyer, or sometimes the seller has to bring money too. And that's a sad situation, of course. But we tell them, that this is what's acceptable, either a cashier's check payable to Capital Title or, of course, a wire transfer. And I had a situation one time where the couple was sitting at the closing table. And so then I was, we finished everything and it was like time to collect the money. It's kind of the hard part. Okay, can you hand over, the money? And I remember this man, he pulled out his personal check and he had, I don't know if he had to bring 90-something thousand to closing. And he just pulled out his personal check. And I was really trying to, hold back here anyway, because it was very clear in all the instructions, it had to be a cashier's check. And he couldn't understand why, at that moment, I couldn't accept his personal check. And sadly, he did have to go across the street to, Chase or Wells Fargo and get that cashier's check and bring it back. So it is, he had the instructions and he still doubted me that, it was going to be fine. We'll just take your personal check.
Yeah. It amazes me sometimes going to closings and people either, even when I set them up, they forget, or they're like, oh, I didn't have a chance to get to the bank. One thing that I try to tell clients now is wires are easier to send the day before, because you can send them and title will hold on to them for a day or two. Don't send them a week. Title doesn't need to have that money that far in advance, but a day or two. And on a wire, when I instruct them and tell me if I'm wrong, is the phone number on the closing disclosure is the title company's phone number that we use to call. That is the number I tell them to call based on that document, not by an email signature, not by anything else, because then that way I know they're going directly to the right title company. Right. And I tell them to get the wire instructions directly from the title company and confirm it with the document that, we can send them. But I always want them to double check, because there has been too much wire fraud out there, like you said, Joe.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure. We're very cautious, very careful with making sure that the instructions are, secure and that they're reconfirmed with the client. Yes.
Yeah.
Brenda, have you ever had somebody, I'm just curious, have you ever had someone just show up with like a bag of cash? Or a briefcase cash.
Well, I have definitely had people ask if, because it's a cash transaction, and have said, that they've planned to bring in a bag full of cash. They never did have, but that's been questioned before for sure. And cash transactions don't mean cash. Sadly. We got to go put that in the bank and then bring us the cashier's check.
Way too many anti-money laundering things that we have to go through if you bring that cash in. So please don't do that to Brenda or any title company.
Yeah. So. Sometimes if we're short, this is crazy. So if, I don't know, maybe there was a last minute change or something at the very end and it's $1.20 more than what was wired. Sometimes 36 cents. But anyway, so this is crazy. We really need the person to give us a check for that difference, a personal check. Yeah. Because otherwise, if they give me $1.20 in cash, I actually have to drive over to the bank in South Lake and deposit it so that we can fund the deal. It's real important that we balance the file in order to cut the disbursements.
Right. Okay, so take a personal checkbook just in case something that minor comes up. I like that.
I think that's always a good idea.
Yeah. So I know different title companies do it different ways. A final closing disclosure has to be balanced out prior to closing. And we want to make sure it's a couple of days in advance, but the day before is typical in our industry, I would say.
Yeah, right.
What entails, just quickly, finding a balanced closing disclosure, the final numbers? What do you guys have to do with the investor to make sure you guys balance out?
Okay. Well, it can be a quick or a lengthy process, but we have instructions from the lender that we work on the CD, various fees, of course, that are lender fees or fees per the contract and commissions and so forth, that we are making sure that we balance to the lender's buyer side, which in turn, of course, helps me to balance the seller. And truly getting those disclosures to the appropriate parties before closing table time is vitally important to create a smooth closing. It's a numbers game. Everybody needs to see the numbers. And everybody, the realtor's eyes are so important that they look at their clients, they know what their buyer, their seller should be, expecting proceed wise. They know what they're supposed to be making. And then of course the buyer and the seller have their opportunity so that we can talk it over and make sure they agree before they sit down in front of me. And, we, have to deal with issues and things. Issues do come up. So not to say everything's perfect, but we try to make it as perfect as possible.
You don't want that shocked look on the face when they see the dollar amount be completely different than what they've ever seen.
Exactly.
I've dealt with some of those clients for other LOs that work, for me in the past and things like that. And that is not a fun conversation.
That happened to me actually when I bought my house back up in Michigan. Yeah. So the first home I bought, I saw the closing disclosure, and it was a few hours, or I think it was in the morning time. And then at the end of the day, I was supposed to go to the title company, get there to sign everything. And the amount that I was supposed to bring, cashier's check, was different. It was about $1,500 more. Right. And of course, I couldn't get a hold of the loan officer. Tried calling, couldn't get a hold of. By the way, 3 days later, still couldn't get a hold of the loan officer. Yeah, totally ghosted me. Right. Wow. Thankfully, it was a Friday, and I got paid that day. So, they kind of, like you said, Brenda, they put a pause on everything. I had to run to the bank, get a cashier's check for basically everything that I got paid that day, right? Come back and, try to proceed forward. But that was not a fun closing at all. No.
Well, and I know that kind of leads us into the next topic is what can delay your closing, and not so much about the timing, right? The date of a closing contract being extended, because we kind of talked about that before. But what can delay your funding? Let's go with that, because everybody needs to know there's a difference between closing and funding. Closing, you go and you sign the documents, and that is your part acknowledging that you are taking this loan out. Funding is after they look at all the documents and now you actually get the money. So Brenda, what can delay the funding on people closing on and wanting to purchase a house?
Right. So one thing, like on the buyer side, if they're supposed to bring specific documents the lender has asked me to collect for them, that can certainly delay a closing. It may still fund the same day, but it's they have to go and grab these documents, whatever they are. It could be basically that thought of where, say, the non-borrowing spouse isn't aware that they have to sign at the closing. There could be last minute walkthrough issues that come up, and that creates roofs in Texas weather, storms and so forth. Yeah. I can't tell you, and you obviously know yourself, Joe, how many times we are ready. We have the lender docs. We are ready to close. I'm 8:30 a.m. Where are they? And then we get the call that, you didn't know that, the roof is torn up and we got to close next week or in 2 weeks. So dealing with those kind of things. I was just thinking here that also we do a bring to date, on the title search. And if something pops up mysteriously that we weren't aware of, we have to clear it in order to give you, the lender, your mortgage policy, and of course the owner's clear title. That can definitely cause a big problem, and let's just don't even start on that. I'm thinking another thought would just be like a power of attorney situation where, someone, it had a business trip and they left and they didn't, we've had this before. They didn't even tell their realtor, that, oh my gosh, the husband had to leave town and do something. So if we had a last minute power of attorney, that could put a damper in things, because obviously title has to approve it. The lender, most importantly, has to approve it. So we will I will personally try to jump through every hoop possible to get to the closing table on time. And I know Joe and I have some crazy stories, cup of Joe, that is, that we can, reflect on and just say, thank you, God, we made it through. But anyway, those are some of the little examples, I suppose.
Joe, what's the craziest one you've had? Because I know Brenda and I've had some really crazy ones. So,
wow, that's a good question. I'd have to think about that. What? I don't know. I don't think I've had. All my loans are clean. So
yeah, that's. I mean, kind of like a fisherman story there. It was that big. Yeah, I see how you are. Yeah, I mean, delays in fundings. For anybody that's out there watching, if you have questions on them, your loan originator or your title person like Brenda, you get a card when you're leaving, or you already have the contact information for your lender. Those should be communicated to. And there's sometimes, like Brenda says, they're out of our control. If the hailstorm happened the night before, more than likely it's going to delay your closing. So those are things that we can't control, but making sure you're prepared for everything. Your loan originator should do a great job. I know Joe does it with his clients. They're prepared 5 days prior to signing, knowing what to bring. So we really appreciate it. Joe, I don't have any more things for Brenda, and I know we're coming up on the time.
I do have one question for you, Brenda, and I'm gonna pull a cup of Joe here and go off script, right? Which I'm surprised, Joe, you haven't gone off script yet today. That's amazing. That's a record, I want you to know. So I'm gonna go ahead and do it. Brenda, I gotta ask, a lot of people don't know why a title company has to be involved. Right. So what is the reason that we can, tell consumers? Because most of them are like, well, why, I'm seeing all this on the closing costs, all, title insurance and, settlement, all this other, why am I paying all this money? Why does the title company have to even be involved?
Okay. Good question. So we are actually an insurance company. And what we're doing is, this is probably the biggest purchase anyone's going to ever make. At the end of the day, they want to protect the purchase. And, if you're a cash buyer, you're looking at an owner policy, and the Texas Department of Insurance sets the rate. So it's not like it's a different rate somewhere at another title company. I mean, it's determined based on the sales price. And so it's a protection and peace of mind to know that you're buying a property that might not be taken away from you due to some prior heir or major lien, that's been placed on the property. So we are, like I said earlier, detectives. We are searching and looking to clear basically from the date of the closing all the way back to dirt, when for that particular property. And of course, if you have a loan, you're the lender, you're going to want to have some protection as well. And so in the state of Texas, what happens is that it's an owner policy based on the sales price. And then there's that simultaneous purchase with $100 for your mortgage policy. And anyway, it's basically at the end of the day, peace of mind.
Well, and like Brenda said, they're detectives. They're doing a bunch of things. If you don't have a title company that you use, and even if you do, we have Brenda's information down here at Capital Title there in Grapevine. You can call their office at 817-329-7300, or you can email Brenda at bread@ctot.com. Give them a chance. They have done wonderful work for me. Actually before 2014, when I met you, Brenda, when I was working at Chase. So I really, really appreciate Capital Title and Grapevine, and especially you, Brenda, for all your partnership and support you've done for me over the years. We're over 10 years now. Now it's 2025, 11 years since we've been doing this together.
Wow.
Yeah. It's been great working with you. I appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you.
Well, we appreciate you coming on today, Brenda, definitely onto our show and educating all of our listeners on being prepared for their closing day. Any realtors out there, please copy down this information, write it down, reach out to Brenda and her team. They are just top tier title company to be able to work with. If you have any questions, anyone have questions in regards to just the process in buying a home that we've been going through in this whole series, this 6-part series, you can definitely reach out to Joe and I at our email addresses. I know Joe popped them up there as far as his and mine both. You can also email us at the Mojo Show podcast at gmail.com. Next week, folks, be sure to tune in at our usual time, Wednesday mornings, 9 a.m. We're going to have some continued education for you next week, as Joe and I always try to do. Thank you everyone for listening in. Love the thumbs up, the hearts, all that stuff. We love seeing that. If you are wanting to, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, wanting to see any of the previous episodes, especially for this 6-part series, go to our YouTube channel, The Mojo Show Real Estate Podcast. And while you're there, be sure to hit that subscribe button, because we are on a mission to get to 1,000 subscribers. Before closing things out, though, any last words or nuggets of advice for us there, Joe?
I would just say again, thank you so much, Brenda, and thank you for everybody that supports us and tunes in. And thank you to my number one host, Joe, over there, because without him, this show would not be going on.
Well,
make it a great day.
I'm Joe Mortgage, and that handsome guy with the beard is Cup of Joe Mortgage, and we'll see you next week.
Mr.